Hello, everyone. Welcome to another series of Beyond the Harp. I'm super excited about today. Before I jump into telling you, oh, you're one step ahead of me. Look at that. I was about to say before I jump in to introduce our guest, let me know that you're here and you can hear me, but you guys are already on it. Thank you so much. Canada, USA, Keith is here. Lots of you letting us know where you're from. So yes, please do write in the comments. Let us know where you're joining us from. And of course, you can already start. Those of you who know who our guest is, you can already start asking your questions, getting them in. William will save them for the end. So don't feel you have to wait. Okay, everyone, this is our Beyond the Harp series, where every month I have a lovely informal natter to one of my harp friends. And I'm really excited about tonight's guest, Ailie Robertson. She is a fantastic harpist, a 5-time gold medalist at the Royal National Mod, a finalist in the BBC Young Traditional Musician of the Year, first prize winner in the inaugural London Harp competition. She is a decorated harpist. I'm really excited to have her here, not just because she's won lots of awards, but actually also because I think her harp playing's great. I love listening to her, and she's also a really dear friend to me. As many of you know, many of you know that one of my favourite harp pieces is Ailie's amazing 10,000 Days and Nights. Ailie, I love playing that piece. Here she is on screen with me. Now, not only is Ailie an amazing harpist, but she is also a sought-after teacher. She has a PhD in composition. She teaches alongside me at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, and Ailie is one of Scotland's leading composers. She's been commissioned by the BBC Proms, the London Philharmonic Orchestra, the Scottish Ensemble, the RSNO, and the Scottish Chamber Choir, just to name a few. And here she is on screen with me. I'm delighted to have you, Ailie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Fabulous. Well, I've talked all about some of your amazing achievements, but I'd love you to start by just taking us right back to the start, where it all began. How did you get into music? And more specific, how did you get into harping?
Yeah, good question. So I started piano when I was about 8 years old. That was sort of the standard thing, and had piano lessons for a few years. I would say I was a terrible piano student. I did not practice. I was really, really terrible. I think my mom was always embarrassed to take me for my lessons. But in the meantime, I was singing in our school, like our primary school choir, and every Christmas we would do a Christmas concert with a group in Edinburgh called the the Harpers, and it was this big harp ensemble, and every year we shared a Christmas concert with them. And so I'd seen these harps, and they always got decorated with this golden tinsel at Christmas time, and I just thought this was fantastic. And so essentially bugged my parents, and they said, no, absolutely not, you're not playing the harp, you're not playing the harp. And finally bugged them enough that they sort of said, okay, well, we'll rent you one for 2 months. And if you don't practice, that's it, it's going home. But luckily I did. And yeah, that was it. So I had a lovely teacher in Edinburgh called Isabel Muris, and sort of learned through school through her. So that was from about the age of 11 or 12 upwards.
Lovely. And at what point did you decide that harping was what you wanted to do for your career? When did you decide to go professional?
So that was a slightly complicated route for me. Whilst I was at school, I really wanted to go and study music, but I was a very, very shy teenager, and I didn't have the guts to tell anybody that this is actually what I wanted to do. And I was also quite academic, and so everyone was sort of pushing me into going into study. It was science was kind of my thing, and so yeah, I didn't have the self-confidence, although I was doing so much music, to say, well, actually, I'd love to go and study music. And I was just too shy to say that that's what I wanted to do, too nervous, so people would laugh at me. And so ended up going I went to Cambridge University. I did a degree in genetics, and that's sort of what I thought was going to then be the end of the story. But towards the end of that degree, what I realized I was missing so much from my life was music. And so I decided, well, I would take a gap year. I would go and I would moved over to Ireland. And I thought I was just going to do a year of just playing music just for fun. It's just going to be a fun year. And then I'll come back and I'll start my real career in science. And the rest is history, as they say. I went over there, loved it. That's where my band formed. And at the end of that, we were really lucky. We got a record deal very quickly, and we started touring. And at the same time, a dear friend who was teaching in Edinburgh was giving up to go. She was moving to France, and she said, well, I've got these 20 harp students. Would you like them? And I said, well, why not? And so, yeah, it was very much a sort of happy accident, I would call it, more than anything. It was definitely not a calculated career all the way through. And I think that's probably true for a lot of things, the subsequent move into composition and things like that. It's all been happy accidents, really, rather than having a plan all the way through.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and this is a little off topic from my little
Mm.
list, but I'm just wondering, like, since you got into, you had this plan of doing this career, which maybe you'd have had much more of a stable job, a more kind of 9 to 5, I'm guessing. But how do you find the musician lifestyle? It's something that in the past a number of our guests have spoken about, how it's difficult and the positives and negatives of the professional musician life. And how do you find navigating that?
That's a really good question. I think, yeah, the hardest thing I think is being self-employed, because there's never an end to the work that you could do. And
Mm.
especially with music, there's never a limit to how much you could be practicing. There's always more you could be doing. There's always more admin you could be doing. There's always more trying to get gigs. So trying to find the off switch, I think, is the hardest thing with being a musician. And it was interesting. So I'd never really missed the science or thought too much about it. At the time, I'd maybe had this slight guilt about leaving it, but it wasn't until the pandemic when suddenly I thought, oh, maybe I'm really selfish being a musician. If I'd gone and if I'd been a scientist, I could be trying to cure this pandemic right now. And then I realized that no, actually, like, music is so important. It's such a important thing for people. It was the savior for a lot of people during that time to have these
Mm.
online concerts that started happening. I started really, like, for me, the launch into online was because I started doing Facebook Lives, and it was because I was bored at home, wanted something to do, and suddenly there was these people from all over the world tuning in, and you realize that music is so important. It is healing in its own way. And so, yeah, it's sort of been a reconciling of that as well, that it isn't important, and it really has its role. But yeah, being a self-employed musician is definitely not for the faint-hearted, let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Lovely. So you already mentioned your band there. A lot of people here will maybe know you as a solo harpist. They'll know a lot about your solo harp work, but something that I really appreciate about your career is the way that I think you've been kind of such a big figure in taking the harp from being that solo instrument or in an ensemble of harpists to being an instrument that can be used in a modern folk band that can hold its own place. And I feel like you're one of those people who's really kind of pushed that forward and pioneered that and brought the harp, forward to be an instrument that can be in a band. So I'd love to hear what you think about the solo harp, your band work, how those things compare, what you like and don't like about these kind of roles that you take on.
Yeah, so I mean, I would very much say that I think that first and foremost, I'm an ensemble player rather than a soloist. Like, I really enjoy playing solo, but the place that I love is being on stage with my friends. And there's something about that communication and connection that you get that's just,
Mm.
there's nothing else like it. It's just this really magical thing. So I say that, yeah, ensemble playing is really where my heart truly lies. And I love the band. It's a really interesting thing to work in a band. It's very different, I think, from working in a classical music ensemble where you have your parts already decided and it's a matter of
Mm.
rehearsing and fitting in with each other. But in a band like we play in, you're navigating everything about the arrangements, deciding the chords together, deciding which tune you'll put with which tune, just sitting, where are you going to shine in the arrangement, where are you going to step back and let other people take the spotlight, all these things. So it's a really, really interesting and really enjoyable project for me. I love that. And then I suppose the solo side, what that gives me is the one negative about being a band is that you've got to think that, well, we're a 5-person band. So I learned early on that you're only going to get your way one out of five times, probably. You know, everything is a negotiation. Everything has to be a democracy. We're lucky that we've got an uneven number of people. So it's related to why I got into composing as well. There's one of the great things about playing solo is that, first of all, you get to make all the artistic decisions. You get to decide exactly what you're going to do. And also, what I like about it is that there's more room to be spontaneous with it. In a band, especially the band I play in, we also have accordion playing the chords. We've also got guitar playing the chords. All our harmonies are kind of worked out so they interlock. So it's very difficult to spontaneously change what you do. Very much it's like we end up doing a similar thing each night. You know, the parts aren't written down, but it's similar. Whereas playing solo, you've got that room for spontaneity. You've got room to improvise. You've got room to do a totally different set of chords the second time round, things like that. And so I really like that and room to like pull out tempo. I love playing slow music. Slow airs are kind of my favorite thing. So again, you've really got the room to like stretch things out in a way that you don't get so much with an ensemble. So yeah, I think they've both got their absolutely wonderful things about them, but they're quite different beasts, I would say.
Yeah, and it helps it's the spice of a musician's life almost, isn't it? That variety.
It absolutely is. But I'd say like my thing that I'm most pleased about in all my time with the band is how many times it's always an electric harp I play with the band. It's a Kamak DHC 32 that I use, and I would say almost every concert somebody comes up to me at the end and says, you know, I couldn't find where the bass was coming from, and I was looking for the bass. And I was thinking, where was it? I was thinking it must be the guitar, it must be the man in the band doing that. And then suddenly I realized it was the harp, and I just love that it was always giving people this idea of what a harp can do that they weren't expecting.
Yeah, that's great. Well, this leads us into a perfect opportunity to share a little bit of your music with the band. So this is from the outside track. We're going to share a little clip, and maybe you could tell us about this track and maybe about what the outside track is up to. But let's listen to the clip first.
Sure.
Now when the other sailors heard the news, they fell into a rage, and with all the whole ship's company, they were willing to engage. Say, we'll tie our hands and feet, me boys, overboard we'll throw her. She'll never see that seaport town called Kennedy.
Tell us a bit about what you were playing there.
Yeah, that's a traditional song called Canada-io, and we learned it from the singing of the wonderful Nick Jones, and it's a story about a girl who's desperate to get to Canada, but she's not allowed on board the ship because it's bad luck to have a woman on board a boat during those times. So she dresses up in sailor's clothes and she smuggles her way on. And about halfway through the journey, they discover that she's a woman. They decide to throw her off board and make her walk the plank. And then the captain says, no, it's okay. She's going to stay with us. She'll get to go to Canada after all. And they fall in love and get married and live happily ever after. Oh, a rare happy folk song.
Oh, lovely. That's nice. And what is happening with the outside track just now?
Bits and bobs. We're about to go to Germany at the end of August, and we've got a festival over there. And then our next things, we've got a Christmas tour. We always do a big Christmas tour out in Germany for a couple of weeks, so that'll be the next thing that we do. So yeah, we're less active than we were. Just a combination of life and other projects going on at the moment. But yeah, we're still kind of ticking along in the background.
Amazing. So you're out in Germany. So if we've got any listeners who are tuning in from Germany, then you guys can watch out. Where can they find out about where you're playing?
And that's on our website, which is just theoutsidetrack.com. And yeah, that gig at the end of the month is just near, it's about 45 minutes from Frankfurt. So if anyone's near to there, then come and check it out.
Amazing. That sounds great. Fabulous. So I'd like to talk to you about another string to your harp, so to speak, and that is your composing. So I'd love you to tell us how you got into composing, like where did that start? Because it seems to be such a big part of the work that you do now.
Yeah, again, composing was something that I sort of fell into, I suppose. In Scotland, when you do your higher music and your advanced higher music at school, there's always a composing module as part of that, and I really enjoyed doing that. And then we'd just kind of continue on and play write little tunes in my spare time. Things like, I think my first sort of hit, as it were, was Sands of Hosta, that, I was just up teaching at a fiche, and that tune kind of wrote itself. And so composing was always something that came to me quite naturally, quite easily. I was sort of one of these lucky people that would sit down at the harp and something could come out quite quickly. But I didn't really think too much more about it until I was quite late. I was probably about 28, 29 or so. And again, at that time, I was touring so much with the Outside Track, and we were probably on the road about 9, 10 months of the year. We were away a lot. And whilst that sounds very glamorous, we were all around the world. The reality is we were in hotel rooms and tour buses or backstage most of the time. And so the writing sort of became a way to express all the things that I was seeing and feeling and experiencing while I was on the road. It became a way to have something that was just mine as well. That thing about it not always being music that was for 5 people. It was suddenly just something that I could create and sort of have some ownership of. That became quite important. And it also just became like an interesting little brain puzzle. Like it was a fun thing to set myself a task of thinking, oh, I've got 20 minutes, let's see if I can write a jig in this time, or whatever. So it was a kind of a fun way to spend the time. And then I realized after a while, I entered a competition and I happened to win it, and I thought, oh, okay, that's really nice. And then I did something else, and again it got chosen. I thought, okay, well, maybe there's something to this. But I'd never had a competition lesson formally at that point in time yet. So then when I was about 29, I decided to go off and do a master's. I moved down to London and did a master's, which actually I didn't finish. But then I went and did a PhD after that. And yeah, so it's just been something that where the kind of interest has grown and grown.
Nice. And so, yeah, your PhD. So actually, you never use your doctor title, or certainly not around us. I don't think I've ever heard you say, I'm Dr. Ailie Robertson. But of course you are Dr. Ailie Robertson. So why did you decide to take on such a huge thing? Well, to me, that's having just done a master's, and our tutors at the moment are like, you should really think about doing a PhD. And I'm like, I cannot think of, no, definitely not. So why did you decide to do a PhD? And that must have been a huge undertaking whilst, managing the weight of a professional music career.
Yeah, the nice thing about PhD is that it sort of links your practice, so the actual writing and the playing, with the opportunity to do some research around it. So what I was really interested in at that time was the kind of the stereotypes around the harp and some of the cultural, I'm going to call it cultural baggage that it carries. Because, the harp it's in general an extremely gendered instrument. It's an instrument that has a very strong kind of aesthetic to it, and it's great that there's more and more people playing it in a modern way now, but there is these sort of angelic undertones to it. It's a really interesting instrument because of all the instruments out there, it underwent the biggest gender shift of any instrument from male to female around the sort of 18th century. I thought that was really fascinating. And so the PhD was an opportunity for me to explore some of these topics and to explore the boundaries, I guess, of the harp and what it could do musically. I was looking at things like tonality and microtonality. I was looking at extended techniques. I was looking at a whole wealth of different things and trying to conceptualize the music in different ways. So although actually a lot of the music I wrote during it I don't now play, it was a really interesting progression, I suppose, in my thinking about the instrument and thinking about what I wanted to do with it, because I did play pedal harp as well. I played the pedal harp for probably about 6 years, but again, I think one of the things that put me off being a professional harpist at the time was this feeling that I wasn't really connecting with the sort of very flowery romantic repertoire that so much of the pedal harp repertoire is. So this was a really interesting way for me to kind of expand on that, I suppose.
And are you interested in getting back to the pedal harp at all? I might have heard a little whisper. Is that something that you're wanting to do?
I would love to. I just can't afford one. If anyone would like to gift me a pedal harp, then I would gladly take it off your hands. That's it. Yeah. No, I keep thinking, well, if I just had more time to practice, maybe I could justify it. But yeah, no, it's sadly at the moment it's not to be. But hopefully at some point I'll be able to afford one. I made the big mistake of I had a beautiful Salve Ariana and I sold it, and that's my biggest regret. Oh, yeah. Why?
Well, we live and learn, don't we?
We really do, yeah.
Well, I think we'll bring up a little example of your composing work. It was really interesting to me to listen to some of your more, obviously I know a lot of your harp compositions and I've played a lot of your harp compositions and loved them. But as I was exploring everything, I did a lot more listening to some of your, for me, more unusual compositions. So I'd really love to hear about your thought process behind them and about composing for ensembles and instruments that are not the harp. So we're going to share an example of that now. And yeah, you can tell us about this one.
So that is a piece that's called Cuine, and the Cuine is the Gaelic word for keening or lamenting, and that's the London Philharmonic Orchestra playing that there. And that was a piece, we've been asked to write a piece that drew from a piece of plain chant, of Gregorian plain chant. And so I'd chosen the one of the melodies for the Stabat Mater Doloroso, the Mother Mary weeping. And what I decided to do was kind of connect that old Gregorian chant melody with this idea of the Scottish keening tradition that we have, this idea of lamenting and sung lament. And so the whole piece, you can listen to the whole thing on YouTube if you want it, but it's kind of connecting those two worlds and trying to reflect that the sound of woman keening and lamenting in a more orchestral way.
Amazing. That's amazing. And actually, I do want to say that all the excerpts that we are sharing here, you can find links to them on Ailie's website. And you, of course, can find lots of information about all her composing work and her CDs and everything, her sheet music, all on our website, which we're sharing with you just now. So talking about composing for an orchestra. I've got a few questions about this, but the first one I want to ask you is, how does it feel? Because I imagine it must feel epic, but how does it feel to sit and listen to an orchestra like that, or an ensemble, a big ensemble like that, playing music that you have written?
I mean, it's amazing just because the sheer weight of power that there's 50 players there. It's like that sheer body of sound that they can hit you with is amazing. And I feel like with the harp, like this thing with the harp, you play a note and it decays, and you're always dealing with decay. Whereas in an orchestra, you've got that power to be able to build and build and build. And yeah, that's a really amazing feeling.
Yeah, amazing. I just think that must be so wonderful to have that experience. I'm also interested to ask you, moving from composing from an instrument or composing for an instrument so well, to starting to compose for all of these different instruments. How do you do that? Do you have to learn? How much do you have to learn about the instrument? Is it just a case of learning the range, or do you have to really study the instrument to a certain extent? How do you go about that process?
Yeah, so there's certainly, like, for every instrument, there's a set of basic rules for it, and you can find that very easily from any. Samuel Adler's orchestration textbook is kind of the one that is always the go-to, and so you can find out the basics of an instrument. But really, the way that you get good at writing from an instrument is two ways: doing lots and lots of listening, going and looking at other repertoire that's been written for it, and trying to really understand what people are doing, and trying to connect with players of the instrument and ask them to try things out for you, ask them to show you certain things. Explain why something works or why something doesn't work. It's same as with the harp. Listening and trying to get your hands on something are really the biggest things that you can do.
Lovely. That's really interesting. Thank you. We've got another example of some of your composing. This is an example of you composing for another solo instrument. So we're going to have a little share of this one, and I'd love to hear a bit about this piece, which is for solo cello. Hmm.
So that's a piece that's called Sky Dance. I wrote it during lockdown, during the very first lockdown we had. I was asked to write this piece, and it's all about the flight of a hen harrier, the birds of prey, and I think it was me longing for freedom when I were kind of locked in my Glasgow
Yeah.
flat at the time. But that was as you can hear there, it's kind of a study particularly in cello harmonics. I love harmonics on the harp, and the way that harmonics work on a string instrument is it's the same physics behind it, but it gives this wonderful kind of airy, wispy effect there. They're really magical, and they're also really, really confusing to learn how to write. So it's sort of like a study for myself as much as anything to really understand how they worked on an instrument.
All right. Okay. And who was that was playing that piece?
And that's a wonderful Scottish cellist called Louise McMonigal, who plays with the Riot Ensemble.
Lovely. She really looked like when I was looking through the pieces and choosing the videos, I felt she really looked like she was really connecting with the music. It looked like she was really, really enjoying playing it. And that must also be so lovely to see a solo instrumentalist take on your work and just really. I mean, do you feel like they make it your own? How do you feel about that?
So that piece I was written specifically for Louise, who's playing it there. So again, it was really nice because we had the opportunity to, I could send her drafts, she could play things for me, send them back, and we kind of got it into its final form together. And that's one of the things I love doing, is actually collaborating with the person who the commission is for and really getting their kind of input on something. But yeah, then it's really interesting as a piece, then sort of it's a little bit like having a child that like leaves the nest, isn't it? It's like it goes away off into the world and people can do with it what they want, and it's really exciting to see the different takes that people have on a piece. That you can it's same with my harp pieces, people play them in different ways, different speeds, different dynamics, and every iteration brings a new freshness to it.
Lovely. That's really nice, yeah. And there was also a solo double bass piece that I listened to, and there was a few versions of that which were really interesting. And I know a little bit of we were having a chat recently. It might have been like 6 months ago, but in the life of a musician, it feels like that was very recent. And you were mentioning that you were really interested and keen to get into a bit more composing for vocalists and choirs. So I'm just wondering, where has that come? I've looked at some compositions for chamber and for strings, and now you're interested in vocals. Has it come from somewhere? Why is it that you're interested in getting into vocal composing?
I suppose just a love of text is actually kind of, I find that when I've got text to work with, the composing comes more easily. You suddenly got a framework to work with. You've got the sound of the words to play with. You've got imagery to deal with. And so, yeah, I really love having that to play around with. It's much less intimidating because you're not starting with a totally blank page when you're starting with writing for voices when you have a text involved. Like you've got something to begin from, and yeah, I just really enjoy it. And I just love, yeah, I've sung in choirs since, as I said before, like since I was a kid. Singing in choirs has been a really important part of my life, and I love the sound of it. There's nothing more amazing than when you walk into a cathedral and there's a choir performing, and it's just it's such a magical sound.
Yeah, that's amazing. And do you have any, maybe you don't have this, but I'm interested to ask anyway. Thinking back to all the different compositions that you've done, do you have a favourite that you loved working on the most, or do you have a favourite that you love listening to the most? Is there one that stands out for you?
Oh, that's really hard. I don't think no, I don't think I have a favorite. I think that they're all quite different, and I think they're
Mm.
all it's like looking through a photo album. It feels like when I look back on them, they're all little snapshots of time and of what I was doing at the time, who I was working with, where I was. Yeah, it feels like they've all got this little memory attached to them. So yeah, it's hard to say which is a favorite.
Oh, that's lovely though. And do you have what's coming up in your composing calendar? Is there anything exciting on the cards? Any projects you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, so actually, I've got a harp one that I'm just working on at the
Oh,
moment. It's there's a wonderful harp duo called Chroma Harp Duo, and so I'm writing a piece for them at the moment. So a three movement new work for them, all based on mythology and mythical creatures from the Nordic countries. So that's really fun. So I'm working on that for them. I'm doing a piece for solo viola. I've got a big community project coming up, and I'm also doing some work for the ABRSM, the exam board, on writing some, not for harp, but writing some other pieces for them. So yes, that's exciting.
amazing. And of course, everybody who's listening out there, all of these projects and exciting compositions that Ailie will share with us, I'm sure in the future, you'll be able to find them on her website. So definitely make sure you're getting on there and subscribe to her newsletter as well. I love getting your newsletters. There's so many lovely harp tips in there and things like this. So definitely pop onto Ailie's website, subscribe to her newsletter, and keep up to date with everything that's going on. I'd love to, and also guys, remember questions in the chat. Have we got questions coming in? Fab. Okay, I'm gonna go on to my last topic, and then we'll let our audience
Sure.
ask some questions. But I just would love you. I know we've talked recently about teaching, but I'd love you to talk a little bit about your teaching practice. You and I, of course, teach in the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, but you don't teach harp there, although you have to come into the harp department more. But can you tell us about your work in the conservatoire?
Yeah, so in the conservatoire, I'm a lecturer, sort of general lecturer for the traditional music course and also for the composition course. So within composition, I do it's the one-to-one lessons in the way that you do with the harp. So that's kind of working individually with students and seeing them every week. And then within the traditional music department, I do teach a composition module often for them. I teach some of the research modules for them. I do bits on arranging, bits on all sorts, lots of bits and pieces for them. But it's lovely. I love the energy of the students. They're a really exciting age to work with as they're just starting to kind of really have that independence and freedom for the first time coming out of school. There's not a set syllabus. They can really start to go down the avenues that they are interested in. And so I think it's a really exciting time to be working with them. And so I love that part of the conservatoire.
And teaching composition what is that like to teach? I mean, it seems like such an individual thing, but is that what it's about? Is it about helping someone find how they can express themselves in music? Is that part of it, or how do you go about teaching composition?
Yeah, so I suppose it's a collection of different things. Like with teaching an instrument, there's techniques to be learned. So we spend time looking at various techniques, looking at doing score study, looking at what other composers have done, trying to kind of essentially learn the craft side of it, I suppose
Mm,
I'll call it that. So, and doing in the same way as in the harp, we would do our technical exercises and our etudes and things like that. We have similar little exercises that we might do, or might set challenges or things like that. But also there's a lot of just trying to really draw out from somebody what is it that they are attracted to aesthetically. Because one of the hardest things with
mm,
composing, with music in general, of course, is that there's no right or wrong answer. But it's really hard to be unique. So it's trying to find for each person what is the thing that makes them unique? What's the thing that's
mm.
different about their music that nobody else is doing or could do? Like what makes it specific to them? And I think that's the real thing that we're trying to draw out of people over that 4 years that they're at the conservatoire.
And who are some of the composers that have influenced you? Who do you have you enjoyed listening to? Who's inspired you in the composition world?
Yeah, so there's a wonderful composer called Sally Beamish. She's a Scottish
Oh yeah.
composer, and she, early on in my career, she was somebody whose music I was listening to and really being inspired by. In Scotland, we've got so many great composers. There's her, there's James McMillan, there's Sweeney. We've got so many great people. I love the minimalists and the post minimalists, like people like David Lang and Julia Wolf. Love their writing. And then in the harp world, like I think discovering the music of people like Bernard Ondwes was a real eye opener for me. Someone who's writing sort of now current new music for harp and music that I found really accessible and exciting. His stuff was great. Discovering pieces like Spiders by Paul Patterson, that was another kind of eye opener for me. I remember at the time when I found it thinking, oh, I've not heard music like this for harp before. So yeah, lots of people.
Amazing. That gives us all a few tips for things to go and look out for, I think. That's really exciting. Thank you for sharing that. Great. Well, I think you need to finish up just by telling us a little bit about the ways that people can maybe work with you. I know you've got your online harp school and your Patreon, and you offer obviously one-to-one lessons. So just for all of the harpists that I know are out there listening and they're becoming inspired and they're wondering, how can I work with this amazing Dr. Ailie Robertson? How can they find you? How can they work with you? What have you got out there that people can connect with?
Yes, there's a couple of different things, as you say. For beginners, I've got a level 1 and level 2 online harp course that people can work through. Then the kind of my more active things, I've got a Patreon subscription, so that gives people access to video lessons and sheet music every month at the sort of the lowest tier. There's also like a harp chat tier or individual lessons you can get. I work with quite a few people on a one-to-one basis, and I find that with adults that can be really variable. Sometimes that's every week, sometimes that's every 2 weeks, sometimes that's once a month. It depends on what people want. But yeah, so it's kind of, there's different models depending on how in depth and how much input people are wanting, how much feedback they want.
That's great. And we've got Ailie's website at the bottom of the screen here again, and we'll share it in the chat as well so you guys can find out all about those different things. And I don't know if you know this, Ailie, but I actually spotlighted one of your arrangements last week in a Frankenstein arrangement video. So kind of like what you're talking about, bringing people learning about their own aesthetics. So I was talking about looking at an arrangement of a piece by 3 different harpists and picking out the bits that you like and thinking about it. So I shared the first 4 bars of your arrangement of Coilsfield House.
Oh, nice.
Which I've also arranged, and so is Mary McMaster. As an example of people to pick out bits that they like and make a Frankenstein arrangement themselves, and then learn about what they actually enjoy in the process of that kind of project. So we shared your website last week as well, and
thank you.
Maybe some people will.
That's a great way to approach, because yeah, absolutely, you learn from looking at what other people do. It's such an important way to do it.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think it's time for me to stop asking all my questions, and let's have a little look at what some other people would like to hear about from you. So what questions have we got waiting for us, Willie? Here we go. So Susanna's asking, have you composed any pieces for beginner or early intermediate level harp players?
Hi, Susanna. Yes, lots. I love writing educational pieces. So in my Harp from the Start books, there's a level 1 and 2 of that. There's lots of original compositions in there. And then more recently, things like I wrote a little tune called Beltane. It must be 2 years ago now, but that's a great one for that sort of early intermediate level of players. It's one that I think the key with pieces at that level is you want tunes that sound really impressive, but that are really easy to play, and so that's definitely one of those. It sounds way harder than it is. So yeah, Beltane is one that I would definitely recommend checking out.
Lovely, thanks Susanna. Okay, Christina is asking, love both of your harping videos. Nice. What advice would you give for someone who is new to transcribing music? I have arrangements and compositions I would love to get down on paper. What are the best methods?
Oh, that's a good question. So I mean, honestly, I've got notebooks and notebooks and notebooks of scribbles. I work generally with computer programs, so with Sibelius, but I do tend to write things out by hand first. So what I would recommend that you do is get really comfortable with writing things down as you go. I rather than do it kind of bar by bar and get it all in, I tend to always do my right hand first, then go through and do my left hand and make sure that everything's adding up to the right number of beats in your bar and that you've got your rests where they need to be and all those things. But transcribing it's a slow process. So yeah, lots of patience, I think, is what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. All right. Have you ever written choral music?
Yes, so I just had a premiere back in June of a piece that I wrote for the Scottish Chamber Choir. That was a three-movement work for them of text by Scottish poets, Scottish female poets. I've written for Capella Nova. I've written for some choirs down in England. So yeah, I love writing choral music.
And can people, I know that some of us actually, some of our audience here, they sing with choirs. Can they purchase your choral arrangements to sing with their choir? Is that on your website?
That's a good question. My website up to date with that. To be honest, it's probably not very up to date with most of that stuff, but you can always email me and I can get things to you. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Absolutely.
I was obviously knee deep in your website today and it is not available on your website, so I'm glad you said people can email you. It's just another one of those admin things, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. If I could split my body in two and have one person doing admin and the other doing music, it'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's great. So people can email you, and then hopefully, if they'd like to sing your pieces in their choir, they can get the music
absolutely.
that way. Amazing. All right, Karen. Hello, Karen. Ailie, I'd love to hear more about your starting points for a new composition. What is it that inspires you?
Oh, lovely question, Karen. It can be a variety of things. It can sometimes be it's a mood, it's an atmosphere, it's trying to capture a moment. So sometimes they're pieces that come very, let's call them organically. You know I want to write a piece. It might be that it's a wedding present for someone and I'm trying to celebrate their joyous personality or something like that. So sometimes there's a kind of organic feel to it. Other times, I think that the writer's block is the hardest thing to get over, and the biggest tip I can give for that is give yourself limitations. I know Heather talked about limitations. They're the most useful thing you can give yourself. Get like a bag, 3 bags, and have all your keys in one and have your time signatures in the other and have your mood in the other, and pull out and you get, okay, it's going to be a G major jig and it's got to be really joyous or something like that, because sometimes just having limits on things is the most important thing. With my competition students, the first thing I do is always set them what I call our 12-minute challenge. And that is exactly what it sounds. I start a timer and I give them 12 minutes and they have to write a piece. And it's amazing how suddenly having a little bit of a deadline and having to make decisions really quickly will produce creativity.
Nice. Yeah, I love creative constraints. So I'm really, really excited that it's really nice when you're like, you say something all the time, like use creative constraints. And then when someone else says the same, you're like, yes.
Exactly. Validate.
Preach it. Lovely. Okay, Joyce. Hello, Joyce. Oh, so along with being an amazing musician and composer, Ailie Robertson, of course, is a wonderful mum. And Joyce is asking, how is your daughter? How are you doing with learning sign language? And does she respond to your harp playing? How is she doing, Ailie?
She's doing fantastically. For those who don't know, I've got she's 19 months old now, 19 months old daughter who is profoundly deaf. And so, as Joyce said, we are learning sign language. I've just finished my level 2 exam. It's really interesting being a learner again, because while I've got lots of sympathy for my harp learners, again, it's really hard learning something as an adult. But I'm really enjoying it. Sophia's responding really well to things. So back in February, March time, she got cochlear implants, which were activated then in April. And she has just started to dance every time she hears music, and it is the cutest thing. We always have a breakfast dance party now. We put on some tunes and we dance around, and it's just the nicest thing. The harp is still a little bit like, she can knock them over far too easily, but she loves sitting. I sit her up on the piano stool and she'll just merrily sit there for 20 minutes bashing away at the keys. So it's really fun seeing her start to enjoy music.
Oh, that's so lovely, Ailie. I'm really, really delighted to hear that. How wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, Kim. Hello, Kim from Vermont. Kim says, I'm curious if there's anything that you learned from putting together your Stepping into the Spotlight course or from running it a few times now that it has a significance for you. Can you tell us what it is before you answer the question?
Yeah, so I run a course called Step into the Spotlight, which is all about trying to help harpists overcome performance anxiety. And I was realizing that especially for adult students, one of the biggest things that was affecting people was nerves. They even just in lesson situations, you look at that thing, oh, I could play it perfectly before, and suddenly I'm in front of you and I'm shaking and I'm forgetting things and things are going wrong, and people were putting so much significance on the mistakes they were making, and it was making people just not enjoy performing. And I thought that was the saddest thing, because performing should be this really joyous, wonderful way of connecting with people. So I have created an 8-week course which really delves deep into psychology of performance, psychology of peak performance, of does lots of looking at things like elite sports people and how they prepare for pressure situations. It looks lots into the psychology of how we talk to ourselves about what we're doing, about our mental chatter that goes on, about things like having routines and rituals that you do every single time. Start giving yourself a feeling of grounding. We look at breath work, we look at mindfulness. It kind of covers a huge spectrum of things, and it gives people a chance to be performing for each other over the 8 weeks. So it feels like one of the most important things that I've done in recent times, and people are responding really well to it, which is lovely. So in connection to Kim's question, is anything I learned from? I mean, I learned an awful lot about. I did a lot of time of looking at scientific studies and looking at the different research that's been done. I think maybe the most interesting thing that we just covered it in the class I did last night. I think this is fascinating. Is that on average, that even a trained musician will only hear 22% of the mistakes that somebody else makes, and that's with having a score in front of them. So I thought that
Ah,
was so reassuring. If you think it, people beat themselves up so much about an odd slip or two, but if you think, if you make 10 mistakes in a piece, probably the average audience member is only going to hear 2 of them at best. So I think that that's really reassuring. Like, mistakes are absolutely not the be all and end all. There's so many more important things that make up a good performance. So yeah, I suppose that, and just really focusing on why it is that we perform, what is it that we're looking to get, and the biggest thing I think is changing our shift from thinking about ourselves and what people are thinking about us to thinking about what are you giving to them in that conversation.
that's lovely. Thank you so much. Oh, so on that subject, Belinda from New Zealand is asking, will there be further rounds of Step into the Spotlight available in the future? Are you planning on running it again, Ailie?
Yeah, there will. So there's another 2 courses starting in September. I think it's September the 16th or so they start. And then, yes, there'll probably be more in January. And if Belinda's in New Zealand, I'm going to try and think about doing some daytime ones as well, because I know there's a lot of people in other time zones where the evenings don't necessarily work for them. So I'll see if I can find a daytime date as well.
Lovely. That's great. Thanks. Okay, Mike. Good to see you, Mike. I'm interested to hear about your writing for Two Harps. We're always looking for pieces we can learn. Do you find writing for Two Harps an inspiring experience?
Yeah, writing for Two Harps is fun, because suddenly there's things that you can achieve that you just can't do on your own, and there's textures that you can get that you can't. Weirdly, I actually find it one of the hardest things to write, because I suppose you're when you've got 2 different instruments, you're constantly thinking about the difference in color between them. Whereas the hard thing with 2 instruments that are the same is you're thinking about how do I make them stand out from each other, or how do you either want them to feel really unified at time or quite distinct from each other. So kind of think, how do you let them intertwine and interlock? So yeah, it's a really interesting experience. It allows you to, well, suddenly you've just got so many more. These are pedal harps that I'm writing for in this one. So I've got 47 times 2, my bad math, 94 strings to suddenly have to deal with. So it's a lot of strings. But yeah, I really love it. It's really exciting.
Nice. Lovely. Okay, we're moving on to our last question from our audience. So Jane is asking, no wonder it's so easy to connect with your slow airs. You're so passionate with them. When can we expect a new course on slow airs?
Oh, I don't know when I'll do another full course in them, but there's lots and lots in my Patreon, and I'm about to release the second tune of this month. I don't know if you call it an air as such, but it's a really gorgeous slow piece, and I'll play it on Sunday night during the concert for you, so you'll get a wee sneak preview of that one.
Amazing. And you've just led me perfectly. Thank you everyone for your lovely questions. You've led me perfectly, Ailie, into reminding everyone that of course you are our special guest for August in the How to Harp membership. We're really delighted that on Sunday, this Sunday the 11th, you're going to be performing for us. And you've already just given us a little taster of what you're going to be playing. So will we be expecting some of your compositions in there then?
Yeah, there'll be some of my compositions. I was trying to think about what to do for this concert because I know that there's quite a few people in your membership who will have heard me play before, and I was thinking, oh, what I do that's not going to be too boring for them. But I thought what I'm gonna sort of base it around is my life in music. Really, I'm gonna kind of go through the pieces and the people who I feel have been really influential for me in my harp journey, and the pieces that have stayed with me for many years, and the compositions that have really been the kind of ones that have been important for me. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna kind of focus it on.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I'm really excited about that. And of course, next weekend we are treated to a workshop from you in the How to Harp membership. What are we going to be covering in that?
Yeah, we're going to be focusing on arranging. So I love arranging for harp. So we're going to look at how do you take a piece and then add, how do you think about what shapes you're going to put in your accompanying hand. And particularly we're going to think about how do we create interesting introductions and interludes, the bits that kind of really make an arrangement sparkle. So it's not just simply playing through the tune, but how do we form it in something that feels like a piece rather than just going through a melody.
That sounds wonderful. I can't wait to get stuck into that with you. And now feels like the perfect time to announce that you are joining us on our harmony course, our level 3 harmony course, which is going to be happening. So I'm really excited to let you guys all know that our level 3 harmony course is based around learning from lots of different harpers. As you guys know, I always talk about imitate, assimilate, innovate. And so in level 3, we're going to be learning from a number of different harpers and actually someone who's not a harper, because we can learn lots from composers who are not harpers. And each of our special guests in the Harmony Level 3 course is going to set us a little task to work on to help us, learn more about arranging or composing. And Ailie is one of our guests. So I'm really excited about working with you on that project. Really fun. Nice. Great.
Really looking forward to that.
Well, Ailie, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for coming and chatting with me tonight. I know that with your wee one, it's always hard at evenings, isn't it, to find the time. So
oh, it's all good.
Thank you for giving up the time to come and chat with us. And I'm really, really looking forward to hearing you play on Sunday. And one last time, I do want to say to everyone that to find out what Ailie's up to get involved in that Patreon, you can look at her website, ailierobertson.com, and do sign up to our newsletter because it's really excellent, especially if you're a harpist. So thank you so much, Ailie, for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Fabulous. Okay, everyone. So just to round up, this has been Beyond the Harp. We've been chatting to the amazing Ailie Robertson. Thank you all so much for being here with me. We have our How to Harp Beyond the Harp series every month, and in September next month we're looking forward to chatting to the amazing Savorna Stevenson. So definitely pop that date in your diary and join me as I chat to her. If you guys are interested in finding out any more about How to Harp, of course all these interviews in Beyond the Harp feature our special guests who perform for us and teach for us in the How to Harp membership. Then you can head over to our website, howtoharp.com, and find out all the information that you need. And I did also mention our harmony course in today's video. You can find about the harmony course there as well. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon.